That night, all I had to do was provide a single electronic signature to save our quarterly numbers. But what they placed in front of me was not a report. It was a trap. Our new director smiled as if I were the villain, yet he was the one holding the match that would burn the building down. I did not seek revenge. I simply followed protocol. The problem was that compliance followed protocol too. And this time, they read every single line. My name is Harper Gonzalez. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallways of Hawthorne Arc Systems. People call me the paper police. They say it behind their hands when they think I am not looking, or they bury it in the subtext of passive-aggressive emails. They think I am the barrier between them and their bonuses. They think I exist solely to slow down the frantic pace of innovation with red tape and checklists. They are wrong. I am not the barrier. I am the safety net. I am the only thing stopping this company from stepping off a ledge and plummeting into a regulatory abyss. But on the night of September 30th, the ledge was closer than ever, and someone was trying to push us off. It was 6 minutes past 7 in the evening. The air in the office was thick, recycled, and stale. It smelled of cold pepperoni pizza that had been sitting in cardboard boxes since lunch, the sharp chemical tang of overheating laser printers, and the distinct, metallic scent of stress sweat. The air conditioning was cranking so hard that the temperature felt more like a server room than a workspace, a desperate attempt by the building management to cool down the hundreds of bodies rushing to meet the fiscal quarter deadline. I was sitting at my desk, rubbing my temples, trying to ignore the migraine that had been building behind my eyes since noon. I was a senior compliance and controls analyst. It was a title that sounded boring to the uninitiated, but in the world of enterprise payment platforms, it meant I was the gatekeeper. Nothing went live without my signature, or at least, that was how it was supposed to work. Grant Halverson, our new director of delivery, had other ideas. A junior project manager tapped on my cubicle wall, looking terrified. He told me Grant wanted to see me in the fishbowl. That was what we called the main glass-walled conference room near the executive corner. It was designed for transparency, but tonight it felt like an interrogation room. I walked through the rows of desks. Engineers were hunched over their keyboards, eyes glazed, fueled by energy drinks and the fear of missing the deadline. I walked into the fishbowl. Grant was alone. He was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a boardroom. Perfect hair, a suit that cost more than 3 of my paychecks combined, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He did not offer me a seat. He simply spun his laptop around on the mahogany table so the screen faced me. Sign the attestation. Harper, Grant said. His voice was calm, almost casual. It was the voice of a man asking for a coffee refill, not someone demanding federal compliance sign-off. I need it done before 8 o'clock. I looked at the screen. It was the final governance review for Project Mirror. This was our flagship payment integration. It handled millions of dollars in transactions. If this system failed, companies would lose money, and we would lose our existence. The form on the screen was a long list of controls: penetration testing, change management validation, vendor risk assessment. I reached for the mouse and started to scroll. Grant, I said, my eyes scanning the rows. These boxes are all checked. Exactly, he said, tapping the table. So sign it. We are good to go. I clicked on the first line item, testing evidence. The folder was empty. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I clicked the next one. Emergency change tickets. There were 3 of them listed, all marked as closed, all marked as approved. I opened the detail view. The description fields were blank. The approval timestamps were missing. The impact analysis section contained a single word, none. I kept clicking. Vendor risk review. Checked as complete. Attachment none. I pulled my hand away from the mouse as if it had bitten me. I looked up at Grant. He was watching me with an expression of mild annoyance, like I was taking too long to order at a drive-thru. This is empty, I said. My voice was steady, trained by years of delivering bad news to powerful men. You have marked everything as complete, but there is no evidence here. There are no logs. There are no test results. The emergency tickets are blank shells. Grant sighed. He leaned back in his chair and laced his fingers behind his head. It is just a procedure. Harper, the work is done. The engineers ran the tests. The vendor is fine. I played golf with their CEO last week. The files are just sitting on someone's local drive. We will upload them tomorrow or the day after. It is just paperwork. It is not just paperwork. I said, it is proof. If I sign this, I am swearing that I have seen the evidence. I am swearing that this system is safe. If I sign this and something goes wrong, it is fraud. Grant dropped his hands. He leaned forward, the playful demeanor vanishing instantly. The air in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Everyone does it, he said. You are being rigid. You are looking for problems because you enjoy being the roadblock. We have a client waiting. Vallon Row Partners expects a go-live notification tonight. Do you know how much that contract is worth? I do not care about the contract value. I said, I care about the fact that you are asking me to falsify a control document. I am asking you to be a team player, Grant snapped. If you do not sign this, you are obstructing the company. You are personally responsible for us missing our quarterly targets. Do you want that on your record? Because I will make sure it is noted. I will write you up for non-collaboration and poor performance. I stood my ground. I had documented everything for months. I knew the rules better than he did. We have an option, I said. We can declare a 24-hour delay. It is in the service level agreement. We can use that time to gather the actual logs and upload them. If the work is truly done like you say, it will only take a few hours to gather the proof. Then I can sign it legally. Grant shook his head slowly. He looked at me with something that resembled pity. But it was colder. It was the look a predator gives prey that does not realize it is already dead. We do not have 24 hours, he said softly, and I do not have time for your little power trip. I will not sign it. I said. Grant smiled. It was a terrifying, slick expression. He reached out and turned the laptop back toward himself. I figured you might say that, he said. You are predictable. Harper, you cling to your rules like a life raft, but the business does not wait for people who cannot swim. He typed something on the keyboard. The sound of the keys clacking was loud in the silent room. I have already prepared a replacement signature, he said. The words hung in the air between us. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. A replacement signature. That was not a standard term. That was not a policy override. That was a crime. What did you say? I asked. You heard me, Grant said, not looking up from the screen. You are dismissed. Harper, go home. Get some sleep. You look tired. He hit the enter key with a flourish. I stared at him for 1 second longer, trying to process the sheer audacity of what he had just admitted. He had not just bypassed me. He had impersonated someone. He had fabricated a governance approval. I turned and walked out of the glass room. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I needed to get to my desk. I needed to document this immediately. I needed to log the time, the conversation, the specific phrase he had used. I stepped out into the hallway. The buzz of the office had changed. The tension had broken. Then I heard it. Ding. It was the distinct, cheerful chime of a Slack notification. It came from the computer of the engineer nearest to me. Then another chime from the next row. Then a chorus of them, rippling across the open floor plan like falling dominoes. I looked up at the large monitor mounted on the wall, the one displaying the company-wide all-hands channel. A bright green banner flashed across the screen. Go live confirmed. The room erupted. People jumped out of their chairs. There was applause. Someone whistled. I saw a cork fly across the room as someone opened a bottle of champagne near the sales desk. They were hugging. They were high-fiving. They were celebrating the end of the quarter. I stood there, frozen in the middle of the rejoicing crowd. They had no idea. They thought they had crossed the finish line. They did not know that Grant Halverson had just lit a match and tossed it into the fuel tank. He had forced the system live without a single verified safety check. He had launched a bomb, and he had used my name to do it, to understand how we arrived at the disaster on September 30th. You have to rewind the clock. You have to go back 4 months to a time when Project Mirror was not a bomb waiting to detonate, but the most disciplined initiative in the history of Hawthorne Arc Systems. I built the compliance playbook for Mirror myself. It was my architecture. I spent weeks mapping every regulatory requirement from the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council and the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard into actionable engineering tickets. I did not do this because I loved bureaucracy. I did it because 3 years ago, a sloppy external audit nearly cost us a contract worth $40 million. I was the one who pulled that account out of the fire by reconstructing 2 years of lost change logs over a sleepless weekend. After that, management stopped calling me annoying and started calling me necessary. They gave me a raise, a senior title, and the unspoken mandate to be the designated buzzkill. I learned to write emails like a defense attorney and speak to developers like a systems architect. I knew that if you told an engineer to follow a rule, they would find a workaround. But if you told them the rule was a constraint of the system architecture, they would respect it. The culture back then was boring, and I loved it. Boring meant safe. Boring meant we went home at 5:30 in the evening. We had fewer meetings. But the tickets were clear. If a requirement was vague, it did not get built. I had allies in the trenches. Owen Rusk, our IT controls manager, was a man who treated server access logs like holy scripture. Owen was the kind of guy who would flag his own mother if she tried to log into the VPN from an unrecognized IP address. Then there was Mia Calder, the QA lead. Mia had a reputation for being destructive. She did not just test software, she tormented it. She would throw garbage data at a payment gateway just to see if she could make it cry. Between Owen's paranoia, Mia's ruthlessness, and my playbook, Project Mirror was bulletproof. Then Grant Halverson arrived. The atmosphere changed the moment he stepped off the elevator on the 4th floor. He did not look like the rest of us. We were a floor of hoodies, jeans, and sensible button-downs. Grant wore Italian suits that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. He had a jawline that could cut glass and a vocabulary entirely composed of corporate buzzwords. His first town hall meeting was a masterclass in saying absolutely nothing while sounding incredibly urgent. He stood at the front of the room, projected a slide deck that was mostly stock photos of sprinters and rockets, and spoke about velocity. "We are too slow," Grant told us, flashing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "We are obsessed with process when we should be obsessed with outcomes. We need to improve our optics. We need quick wins to show the board that Hawthorne is a predator in this market, not prey." I sat in the back row next to Owen. I saw Owen check his watch 3 times in 5 minutes. That was his tell for when he smelled nonsense. Grant did not waste time. Within 2 weeks, the phrase "we will do that later" vanished from our vocabulary. It was replaced by "do it now." He began what he called an optimization of our workflow. In reality, he was stripping the insulation off the wires. He reduced the approval hierarchy for code deployment from 3 people to 1. He argued that having a peer review, a manager review, and a security review was redundancy. Trust your people. He said during a strategy session, "If you hire good engineers, get out of their way." It sounded empowering. The junior developers loved it because it meant less paperwork, but I knew the difference between trust and negligence. He merged the integration testing phase with the user acceptance testing phase. Mia was furious. She stormed into my office, her face red. "He is taking away my regression cycle," she said, pacing back and forth in my small cubicle. "He wants us to test new features in the same environment where the client is doing their demo. Harper, if I crash the staging server while the client is logged in, we lose the deal. It is suicide. I will talk to him, I promised." But talking to Grant was like talking to a wall that had been painted with a mural of teamwork. He did not shout. He did not get angry. He just smiled that condescending smile and used words like agility and friction. "Compliance is a bottleneck. Harper." He told me one afternoon when I raised concerns about the reduced testing timeline, "You are thinking like an auditor. I need you to think like a partner. We are here to deliver value, not to fill out forms." The biggest blow came a week later. An organizational chart update landed in our inboxes at 4 o'clock on a Friday. I clicked the PDF. I scanned for my name. I expected to see myself still reporting to the Director of Corporate Compliance, a stern but fair woman named Elena who worked out of the Chicago office. Instead, my line on the chart had been moved. Dotted lines were gone. Solid lines were redrawn. I was now reporting directly to the Director of Delivery. I was reporting to Grant Halverson. I walked straight to his office. His door was open. He was on a call, but he waved me in, pointing to a chair. He finished his conversation something about a golf weekend in Martha's Vineyard and hung up. "I see you got the email," he said, looking pleased with himself. "This is a conflict of interest," I said flatly. "Compliance cannot report to delivery. I am supposed to check your work. I cannot check your work if my performance review depends on you liking the result." Grant laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. "We are breaking down silos. Harper, this is a modern structure. Embedded compliance. You are part of the delivery team now. You help us move faster by clearing the obstacles from the inside." I realized then what kind of man Grant was. I had met directors who hated regulations because they did not understand them. Grant was different. He understood the rules perfectly. He did not hate the law. He just hated the fact that the law did not care about his bonus structure. He viewed compliance not as a requirement, but as a variable he could manipulate. I went back to my desk and opened my email archives. I wanted to know where this man had come from. The announcement from Human Resources had been vague. It said he was an internal transfer from a division called Strategic Programs. That was strange. I had been at Hawthorne for 7 years. I knew the org chart better than I knew my own family tree. I had never heard of a division called Strategic Programs. I messaged a friend in the New York office. No clue. I checked the global directory from 6 months ago. The division did not exist. I went to LinkedIn. Grant's profile was impressive, but oddly generic. Years of leadership, proven track record of high-velocity delivery. But there were gaps. Companies that had been acquired and dissolved. References to projects that were under non-disclosure agreements. He was a ghost in a $2,000 suit. That was the moment my survival instinct kicked in. The same instinct that made me double-check my front door lock every night. I opened my bag and took out a plain black notebook. Then I stopped. A physical notebook could be lost or stolen. A file on the company server could be accessed by IT. I opened a local text editor on my personal tablet, which I kept in my bag for reading during lunch. I created a new file. I named it Recipes. I typed the date, May 12th. Grant Halverson instructed Mia Calder to skip regression testing Suite B. Reason given velocity. Mia objected. Objection overruled. Risk level high. I did not record any sensitive company data. No customer names. No code snippets. Nothing that could get me fired for data exfiltration. I only recorded the timeline. Who said what? Who ordered what? Who was in the room? It was not a diary. It was an evidence log. I knew the crash was coming. I could feel it in the way the air in the office had changed, becoming brittle and frantic. Grant was driving the car, and he had just cut the brake lines to make it lighter. I was not going to be the one in the passenger seat when we hit the wall. I was going to be the witness on the side of the road. The decomposition of Project Mirror did not happen all at once. It happened in a series of small, calculated cuts. 2 weeks before the go-live date, Grant Halverson called an emergency realignment meeting. He did not reserve a conference room. Instead, he stood in the center of the open plan office, forcing everyone to pull their headphones off and swivel their chairs toward him. It was a power move designed to make the announcement feel like a rally rather than a demolition. "We are pivoting on the security validation phase," Grant announced, his voice projecting clearly across the silent floor. "The full penetration test is scheduled to take 10 days. We do not have 10 days. Vallon Row Partners wants a demo next Tuesday. If we make them wait, they walk." I stood up from my desk. The penetration test was not optional. It was the only way to ensure that hackers could not breach the payment gateway and siphon off funds. "Grant," I said, keeping my voice level, "a vulnerability scan is not the same as a penetration test. A scan just checks if the doors are locked. A pen test checks if the windows can be smashed. If we switch to a scan, we are launching a financial product without knowing if it is secure." "We are running a standard vulnerability scan," Grant countered, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "It is faster. It produces a clean report. That is what the client needs to see." Mia Calder spoke up from the QA row. Her face was pale. She looked like someone who had not slept in 3 days. "It is not just the security check," Mia said. "If you cut that timeline, you are cutting into my regression testing. I need at least 48 hours to ensure the new code does not break the old features. If we skip that, I cannot guarantee the system will even process a transaction." Grant turned his charm on her, but it was a weaponized sort of charm. He walked over to her desk and leaned against the partition, towering over her. "Mia," he said softly, "you are thinking like an engineer. I need you to think like a salesperson. We do not sell tests. We sell confidence. If the interface looks good and the login works, the client will be happy. We can fix the back-end bugs in the first patch." Mia looked down at her keyboard. She knew, just as I did, that arguing with him was like arguing with a landslide. The meeting dispersed. But the damage was done. The schedule was slashed. The safety checks were gutted. Later that afternoon, Owen Rusk appeared at the entrance of my cubicle. He did not knock. He just stood there, looking nervous. Owen was a large man who usually radiated a calm, stoic energy, but today he was vibrating with anxiety. "You need to see this," he whispered. I followed him to his desk in the corner of the server room. He pulled up a ticket request on his second monitor. It was a request for a new user account. "Read the description," Owen said. I leaned in. The request was for a service account with elevated administrative privileges. The justification field said, "Integration efficiency for development team." The requester was Grant Halverson. "He wants a shared admin account," I said, feeling a spike of alarm. "He wants a single login that multiple developers can use to push code." "Exactly," Owen said. "It violates every segregation of duties policy we have. If 5 people use the same login, we have no way of knowing who pushed a specific line of code. If someone plants malware or steals data, the logs will just show the generic account name. It is a ghost key." "Did you approve it?" I asked. "I rejected it," Owen said. 10 minutes ago, I cited the access control policy." "Good," I said. "Harper," Owen said, pointing at the screen. "Look at the status now." I looked. The ticket status was approved. "How?" I asked. "If you rejected it, how is it active?" "He reopened it and routed it to a junior admin in the night shift," Owen said grimly. "He bullied the kid into granting access. He told him it was a direct order from the director of delivery and that refusing would be insubordination." I felt the blood drain from my face. This was no longer just about cutting corners. This was a systematic dismantling of our controls. I went back to my desk and opened my email. I knew I had to create a paper trail that was impossible to ignore. I drafted a formal memo. I titled it, "Risk Acceptance Notification Project Mirror Security Protocol Deviations." In the body of the email, I listed everything: the cancellation of the penetration test, the reduction of QA timelines, the creation of the shared administrative account. I referenced the specific clauses in our compliance handbook that were being violated. I concluded the email with a clear ultimatum due to these deviations. Compliance cannot certify the system for release. If the business chooses to proceed, the director of delivery must formally accept these risks in writing, acknowledging that the system does not meet our internal control standards. I sent it to Grant, copying the legal department and the VP of engineering. I expected a fight. I expected him to call me into his office and yell. I expected him to try to negotiate the language. 5 minutes later, my inbox pinged. It was a reply from Grant. He had hit reply all. The body of his email contained 3 words: approved, move forward. I stared at the screen. He had not addressed a single point. He had not provided a remediation plan. He had simply acknowledged the risk and told us to drive the car off the cliff anyway. It was arrogant, but it was also clever. He had given me what I asked for an approval, but he had done it in a way that made it look like I was just asking for permission to proceed. not warning him of a disaster, but I was not done. To push the code into the production environment, we needed a change advisory board ticket. This was the final gate. Even with Grant's email, the system required a formal ticket with a digital signature from the compliance officer. That was me. I logged into the ticketing system. I searched for the change request associated with the go-live. I found it. Ticket number CR4092. I froze. The status bar at the top of the ticket was green. It read, completed. I clicked on the approval tab. There was my name, Harper Gonzalez. Next to it was a timestamp, September 29th, 2:30 p.m. I had been in a dentist appointment at 2:30. I had not been near my computer. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. Someone had not just overruled me. Someone had impersonated me. I immediately clicked on the History tab. This was the audit trail of the ticket itself. It showed every modification made to the record. If someone had logged in as me, it would show the IP address. I scrolled down. 1430. Approved by Harper Gonzalez. But something was wrong. Usually, the system logged the specific machine ID. This entry was clean. Too clean. I dug deeper. I had read only access to the database logs that underpinned the ticketing software. It was a skill I had picked up from Owen years ago. I ran a query for the ticket ID. The raw data appeared on my screen in lines of code. I saw the entry for the approval, and then I saw the flag, edited by administrator. The timestamp of the approval had been manually altered. The approval had not happened at 2:30. The record had been inserted into the database at 4:15, but the time field had been hard-coded to look like it happened earlier. Someone with root access to the ticketing system had gone into the backend and forged the approval, then tried to cover their tracks by editing the time. There was only one person who had recently demanded and received a shared administrative account with root privileges, Grant Halverson. He was not just reckless, he was falsifying corporate records. This was fraud. I reached for my phone to take a picture of the screen. My hand was shaking. I needed to send this to the ethics committee. I needed to call the external auditors. Before I could unlock my phone, a notification popped up on my laptop screen. It was a calendar invitation. Subject Performance Alignment. Host Grant Halverson. Attendee Sabrina Holt. Human Resources. Time, September 30th, 6 p.m. The meeting was set for tomorrow night. 1 hour before the final attestation deadline, I stared at the invitation. Performance alignment was corporate code for "you are about to be fired." Grant knew I was tracking him. He knew I was building a case, and he was going to strike first. He was going to cut me out of the company before I could blow the whistle. I looked around the office. The engineers were still typing furiously. The hum of the servers filled the room. No one else knew that the system they were building was already broken. No one knew that the man leading them was rewriting reality to suit his ambition. I accepted the meeting invite. I did not pack up my things. I did not go home. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Doomsday. If he wanted a war, he was going to get one. I began to export every email, every ticket log, and every risk memo I had ever written. I had 24 hours until the meeting. I had to make every second count. The conference room for Human Resources was smaller than the glass-walled fishbowl where Grant held court. It was a windowless box on the second floor, painted a calming shade of beige that I found aggressively depressing. It was 6 o'clock in the evening. Most of the office was either gone or frantically coding for the launch, but here, the air was still and heavy with the scent of cheap air freshener. I sat on one side of the small round table. Sabrina Holt, our HR generalist, sat opposite me. She looked exhausted. Her blazer was wrinkled, and she kept clicking a ballpoint pen nervously against her notebook. Grant Halverson sat between us, leaning back in his chair with that signature ease of his, looking like he was about to judge a talent show rather than terminate a career. "Thank you for joining us." "Harper," Sabrina began. Her voice was thin. She did not look me in the eye. "We wanted to have a conversation about performance alignment. As we move into this critical phase with Project Mirror, it is vital that everyone is pulling in the same direction." I folded my hands on the table. I could feel my pulse in my throat, but I kept my face blank. I am pulling in the same direction. Sabrina, I said, I want the company to release a compliant product. That is my job description. Grant sighed. It was a long, disappointed sound, like a parent dealing with a toddler who refused to eat their vegetables. That is exactly the issue we need to discuss, Grant said. He turned his body toward me, invading my personal space just enough to be intimidating. Harper, there is a difference between doing your job and obstructing the workflow. Over the past month, I have noticed a pattern. You ask questions that do not need to be asked. You demand meetings for trivial clarifications. You create a sense of distrust among the engineering team. I stared at him. I ask questions because the documentation is blank. I demand meetings because you canceled the standard review cycles. And if there is distrust, it is because you are asking developers to bypass security protocols. See, Grant gestured to Sabrina with an open palm. This is what I mean. The defensiveness, the rigidity. Harper, we are a technology company. We need velocity. When you flag every single change ticket for a manual review, you are not protecting us. You are anchoring us. I flag tickets that lack evidence, I said. That is not anchoring. That is auditing. Sabrina cleared her throat. She looked uncomfortable being in the middle of this. Harper, the feedback here is about your approach. Grant feels that your communication style is adversarial. He feels that you are not acting as a partner to the delivery team. I am not a partner, I said, my voice hardening. I am a control function. My job is to be adversarial when the risk is high. If I am too friendly, I am useless. Grant leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table. He clasped his hands together. Let us find a middle ground, he said. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, as if he were offering me a lifeline. I know you take your role seriously. I respect that. But I need you to show some flexibility. I need a gesture of goodwill. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a printed list of the low-risk compliance items for the project. Things like documentation formatting, version control naming conventions, and user interface consistency checks. Sign these off tonight, Grant said. Just the low-risk items. Clear this backlog. It will show the team that you are willing to move things forward. It will show me that you can be a team player. If you do that, we can forget this entire performance conversation ever happened. I looked at the paper, then I looked at Grant. It was a bribe, a subtle, administrative bribe. He wanted me to compromise my integrity on the small things so that when he demanded I sign the big things, I would already be dirty. I can sign these, I said slowly, but I will need to add a conditional note. I will write that these are approved pending the completion of the full security audit. I will explicitly state that this does not constitute a full system approval. Grant's smile vanished. No notes, no conditions, a clean signature. I cannot do that, I said. That would be misleading. Without the security audit, even the low-risk items are technically invalid because the environment itself is not certified. You are being impossible, Grant said, sitting back. You are choosing to be difficult. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. But then it buzzed again, and again, a triple tap. That was my signal with Owen. I glanced down at my lap under the table. It was a text from Owen Rusk. They are overriding controls in the live database. I see the logs. They are stripping the encryption requirement for the legacy data import to make it run faster. This is bad. Be careful. I felt a cold shiver. They were stripping encryption. That was a firing offense for any engineer. For a director to authorize it was insanity. I needed backup. I needed to get out of this room and escalate this above Grant's head. I need a moment to consider this, I said to the room. I need to use the restroom. Grant waved his hand dismissively. Go ahead. We will be here. I walked out of the room and down the hall. I ducked into the ladies' room and locked myself in the farthest stall. My hands were shaking. I pulled up my contact list and found the number for Elena Vance, the former director of compliance who now worked out of Chicago. She was technically no longer my boss, but she was the only person with enough political weight to stop Grant. I dialed her extension. It rang once, then a robotic voice answered. The party you are trying to reach is unavailable. Please note that per the new delivery organization structure, all compliance escalations must be routed through the office of Grant Halverson. Please press 1 to be transferred to his executive assistant. I almost dropped the phone. He had not just moved me on the org chart. He had rerouted the phone lines. He had built a wall around us so tall that no one could hear us screaming. I hung up. I washed my face with cold water, trying to wash away the panic. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, but my eyes were angry. I was not going to let him win. I walked back into the HR conference room. Grant was checking his watch. Sabrina was rubbing her forehead. I am not signing, I said. I remained standing. Not the low-risk items, not the high-risk items, nothing, not until I see the raw logs for the penetration test. Grant looked at Sabrina. I think we are done here. Note her refusal in the file. Sabrina looked up at me with pleading eyes. Harper, please, just think about your position. Grant has told me that he has high-level approval for this accelerated timeline. The executives know about the shortcuts. You are fighting a battle that has already been decided. I froze. What did you say? I asked. Sabrina blinked, realizing she had said too much. I just meant that the business is aware of the strategy. You said high-level approval, I pressed. Who? Which executive approved skipping the security protocols? Was it the CIO? Was it the CFO? Sabrina clamped her mouth shut. She looked at Grant with panic. Grant stood up smoothly. That is enough. Sabrina was speaking generally. We do not need to discuss executive strategy with an analyst. If there is a written approval from the C-suite to bypass controls, produce it, I said, my voice rising for the first time. Show me the email. Show me the signature. If the CEO signed off on this risk, then I will stand down. But until I see that name, I assume you are acting alone. Grant walked to the door and held it open. You have until 8 o'clock tonight to change your mind. Harper, after that, I cannot protect you from the consequences of your own stubbornness. I walked out. I did not go back to my desk. I walked straight to the elevator. I needed to get out of the building. The air in there was poisonous. I stepped out into the cool evening air of the parking lot. It was dark. The streetlights were humming. I sat in my car and locked the doors. I had tried to follow the process. I had tried to raise tickets. I had tried to talk to my manager. I had tried to talk to HR. Every door was locked. Every avenue was blocked by Grant Halverson. There was only one door left. It was the door you only opened when you were ready to burn your own career to save the company. I pulled out my phone and opened the browser. I did not use the company Wi-Fi. I used my cellular data. I navigated to the third-party website that hosted our ethics and integrity hotline. It was an external service, completely independent of Hawthorne Arc Systems. I clicked, Submit a new report. The screen asked if I wanted to remain anonymous. I clicked yes. I began to type. My thumbs flew across the screen. I detailed the falsified tickets. I detailed the pressure from Grant. I detailed the conversation with Sabrina and the admission of unauthorized high-level approval. I detailed Owen's text about the encryption stripping. I attached the screenshots I had taken of the database logs, showing the edited timestamps. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was it. Once I hit submit, there was no going back. An investigation would be triggered automatically. External auditors would be notified. The board of directors would receive a summary. I read through the report one last time. It was factual. It was dry. It was damning. I pressed submit. A confirmation number appeared on the screen. Case number 88392B. I took a screenshot of the number. I started the engine of my car. I was going to go home. I was going to feed my cat. And then I was going to wait for the explosion. We are back in the fishbowl. It is September 30th, 7 o'clock in the evening. The air is still freezing, and the smell of pepperoni pizza is still nauseating. Grant Halverson had just delivered his line about the replacement signature. The words were still hanging in the air, toxic and heavy. He spun the laptop toward me one last time. The screen glowed with the attestation form, the cursor blinking in the empty signature field. "Last chance," Grant said. His voice was devoid of the charm he used in town halls. It was flat and hard, like a stone skipping over water. "Sign the document, Harper, or I will remove you from this building." I looked at the screen. I knew that if I walked away now, he would use my absence to validate his fraud. He would say I was unavailable and use that emergency delegation power he had stolen. I needed to leave a mark in the system. I needed to leave a scar that an auditor could find. I reached for the laptop. Grant smiled, thinking I had broken. "Smart choice," he said. I placed my fingers on the keyboard, but I did not type my name. I hit the tab key, jumping past the signature line to the comments and exceptions field at the bottom of the form. It was a field rarely used, usually reserved for minor technical notes. I began to type fast. "User is unable to attest due to missing evidence for controls, point 1, 4.2, and 7.5. Penetration testing incomplete. Administrative override applied without compliance approval." I got as far as the word approval before Grant realized what I was doing. "What are you doing?" he snapped. He lunged across the mahogany table. He did not just reach for the computer. He snatched it with a violence that knocked his coffee cup over. Dark liquid splashed onto the expensive carpet, but he did not look down. He slammed the laptop lid shut. "That is insubordination," Grant said, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "You are deliberately sabotaging a critical delivery event. You are damaging the company." He turned to the glass door and waved. Sabrina Holt, the HR generalist, had been waiting in the hallway. I realized then that this entire scene had been choreographed. She walked in, clutching a manila folder to her chest like a shield. She could not meet my eyes. "Sabrina," Grant said, straightening his suit jacket, "Harper is refusing a direct order. She is compromising the launch. Initiate the protocol." Sabrina cleared her throat. She opened the folder. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Harper Gonzalez," she read from a prepared script. "Effective immediately. You are being placed on paid administrative leave pending an internal investigation into your conduct. This measure is being taken to protect the integrity of Project Mirror and to ensure a safe working environment. To protect the project," I repeated, my voice calm. It was a terrifying kind of calm. I felt like I was watching myself from the ceiling. "You are removing the only person who is actually trying to protect the project." "Please do not make a scene," Sabrina whispered. She slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a checklist of company property. We need your laptop, your building access badge, and your corporate credit card. Your network access has already been terminated." I looked at my phone. The signal bars for the company Wi-Fi had vanished. I was already a ghost. I stood up. I did not scream. I did not cry. I knew that any display of emotion would be used against me. They would document it as instability or aggression. I had to be a statue. "I will collect my personal items," I said. "I will escort you," Sabrina said. We walked out of the fishbowl. The office was buzzing with the pre-launch energy. Engineers were laughing, sharing jokes in the Slack channels, completely unaware that an execution was happening in their midst. I walked to my desk. I put my framed photo of my cat into my bag. I took my hand lotion. I took my water bottle. Grant stood at the end of the row, watching me with his arms crossed. He was making sure I did not touch any paper files. He was making sure I did not talk to the team. I zipped up my bag. I placed my company laptop on the desk. I placed my badge on top of it. "Sabrina," I said, loud enough for Grant to hear, "I am complying with the administrative leave. However, I have a formal request." Sabrina looked up, startled. "What?" "I am formally requesting a legal hold on my entire email mailbox and my ticket history for the last 6 months. I said, I used the precise legal terminology. I believe this material will be relevant to the internal investigation and potential regulatory inquiries. I want it confirmed in writing that these data sets will not be deleted or scrubbed." The color drained from Sabrina's face. A legal hold was a serious phrase. It implied lawsuits. It implied subpoenas. It was the one thing HR departments feared more than anything. I will have to check with legal, Sabrina stammered. Grant laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Do not let her spook you, Sabrina, he said, walking over. She is just throwing words around. There is no lawsuit here. Just a disgruntled employee who could not handle the pace. We do not need a legal hold for a performance issue. I looked directly at Grant. It is standard procedure, Grant. If you have nothing to hide, a preservation order protects you. 2. Why would you object to preserving the truth? Grant's jaw tightened. He did not answer. He just pointed to the exit. Escort her out, he said. I shouldered my bag. I felt a heavy, crushing weight in my chest. I had spent 7 years building this compliance program. I had spent thousands of hours in this building, and now I was being marched out like a criminal because I refused to lie. As I passed the server room, the door cracked open. Owen Rusk stepped out. He was holding a bundle of Cat6 cables, trying to look busy. He saw Sabrina walking behind me. He saw my empty desk. He understood immediately. He fell into step beside me for a brief second as we navigated the narrow corridor toward the elevators. The email sign-off system, he whispered. His voice was barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. It logs the IP address of the machine that generates the signature request. Even if they spoof the name, they cannot spoof the physical machine ID unless they scrub the deep logs. I did not look at him. I kept walking. Be careful, Owen, I whispered back. They cannot fire all of us, he muttered, then ducked back into the shadows of the server room. We reached the lobby. The security guard, a man named Marcus, who I greeted every morning, looked confused. He saw Sabrina take my badge. He saw the look on my face. He looked down at his desk, pretending to be busy with a logbook. He knew better than to ask. We will contact you regarding the next steps, Sabrina said at the glass doors. She sounded relieved to be getting rid of me. Do not log into any company systems. Do not contact any employees. Goodbye, Sabrina, I said. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the night. The city air was cold and smelled of exhaust and rain. The noise of the traffic was a shock after the quiet tension of the office. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the concrete. I felt lightheaded. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking now that the performance was over. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The silence of the car wrapped around me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my heart rate. It was done. They had fired the watchdog. Now they were free to loot the bank. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a single, sharp vibration. I picked it up. The screen lit up in the darkness. It was a notification from the encrypted messaging app I had used to submit the report earlier that evening. Status update report received. Case number 88392B has been opened. Priority level critical. An investigator has been assigned. I stared at the screen. The machine was slow, but it was moving. Grant had his timeline. He had his launch at 8 o'clock, but I had my own timeline now, and mine did not have a deadline. I started the car and drove toward the exit gate. In the rearview mirror, I saw the lights of the Hawthorne Arc Systems building glowing against the night sky. On the 4th floor, I could see the silhouette of the celebration beginning. I saw the green light of the monitors. They were popping champagne. I merged onto the highway. Let them drink. The hangover was going to be catastrophic. The morning of October 1st broke with a deceptive calm. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by the silence of my apartment, drinking coffee that tasted like battery acid. I had not slept. My laptop, my personal one, was open on the coffee table, but I was not logged in. I was physically detached from Hawthorne Arc Systems, but mentally, I was still trapped in that building. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the notifications started. I was part of a group chat with a few former colleagues, a safe space where we used to complain about the cafeteria food. Now, it was a news ticker for a disaster. It is live. One message read, Grant just popped a bottle of Dom Perignon in the fishbowl. Another said, "He is posting pictures in the Winds channel. Everyone is clapping." I could see it perfectly in my mind. The Slack channels would be exploding with the party parrot emojis and the rocket ship icons. The executives would be congratulating each other on their agility and speed. They were celebrating the launch of Project Mirror like it was a victory, completely unaware that the engine was held together with duct tape and lies. I put my phone face down on the carpet. I tried to read a book. I tried to water my plants, but the anxiety was a physical weight in my chest. I kept checking the external portal for the ethics hotline. Case status open. Review in progress. It was too slow. The world was moving at the speed of fiber optics, and justice was moving at the speed of a fax machine. By noon, the euphoria at the office began to curdle into confusion. My personal phone started buzzing with direct text messages from junior analysts who did not know I had been placed on leave. "Hey Harper, sorry to bother you." One text read, "I am looking for the vendor risk assessment for the payment gateway. The folder is empty. Grant said you handled it. Can you tell me where it is saved?" I stared at the message. Grant was already spinning the narrative. He was telling them the work was done, implying that if the files were missing, it was a clerical error on my part. I did not reply. I could not reply. Any communication from me could be construed as interfering with the investigation. Then came a message from Mia Calder. It was not a text. It was a message on an encrypted Signal app that deletes messages after reading. "I am sorry," she wrote. "I had to sign the pass." He stood over my desk. "Harper." He told me that if I did not sign the QA release, the delay would come out of the bonus pool for the whole engineering team. Everyone was looking at me. I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids in private school. I am a coward. I felt a surge of pity for her. This was how corruption worked. It did not always look like a villain twisting a mustache. Sometimes it looked like a tired mother terrified of losing her health insurance. Grant had weaponized her fear. "Do not talk to me," I typed back, my fingers trembling. "Protect yourself. Document everything." An hour later, Owen Rusk reached out. He was smarter than the others. He did not text. He called me from a burner number. "Do not say anything," Owen said the moment I picked up. "Just listen. I did a sweep of the production server logs 10 minutes ago. I wanted to see how the system was handling the live traffic." "And?" I asked, breaking my own rule of silence. "The logging level has been changed," Owen said, his voice tight with anger. "Standard protocol requires us to log all warnings and errors. Someone changed the configuration setting to log only critical system failures. They suppressed the warning signals." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because the system is throwing thousands of errors," Owen said. "If they left the logging on, the dashboard would be flashing red. It would trigger an automatic alert to the client's security team. So Grant turned off the smoke detectors to hide the fire. If a transaction fails or data leaks right now, we will not even know until a customer screams." "That is negligence," I said. "That is intentional data suppression." "It gets worse," Owen said. "We just got an email from Valenrow Partners. The client, their compliance officer, wants the full evidence package. They want the SOC-style report showing the testing results and the access logs. They gave us a 48-hour deadline." I closed my eyes. This was the moment. This was where the bluff collapsed. You could bully an internal QA lead. You could fire an internal compliance analyst, but you could not bully a billion-dollar client. "What did Grant say?" I asked. "He replied immediately." Owen said. "He replied to the client and said, 'We have it. The package is being compiled and will be sent shortly.' He lied. Harper. He put it in writing to an external party. He is buying time, I said. He thinks he can forge the documents in 2 days. He is insane, Owen whispered. I have to go. He's walking toward my desk. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the blank wall. Grant Halverson was not just cutting corners anymore. He was digging a grave. He had promised a document that did not exist. To create it, he would need to generate fake test data, backdate logs, and create false vendor reviews. It was a massive amount of work to do in 48 hours without raising suspicion. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang again. The caller ID made my stomach drop. It was Sabrina Holt from HR. I hesitated. I was under no obligation to answer work calls while on leave, but curiosity won. I swiped the screen. "Hello, Sabrina?" I said. "Harper," she said. Her voice was breathless, high-pitched. She sounded like she was hiding in a closet. "I am sorry to call you on your personal number. I know this is irregular. I am on administrative leave, Sabrina," I reminded her. "Is there an update on the investigation?" No, not yet," she said quickly. "This is informal. We are trying to locate some files. Grant mentioned that you might have kept personal copies of the project documentation on a hard drive or a cloud account, just for backup purposes." I gripped the phone tighter. They were desperate. They could not find the proof because the proof did not exist. So they were hoping I had stashed something away, anything that they could use to satisfy the client. "Grant is mistaken," I said, my voice cool and professional. "I follow the data security policy strictly. I do not retain company intellectual property on personal devices. That would be a violation of my contract." "Right," Sabrina said. She sounded like she was about to cry. "Of course. It is just, the team is having trouble locating the specific sign-off sheets for the vendor review. We thought maybe you had downloaded them." "The folder was empty, Sabrina," I said. "I showed it to Grant last night. He knows it is empty." There was a long silence on the other end. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Thank you. Harper." She hung up. The desperation in her voice confirmed everything. The walls were closing in on them. Grant was scrambling. He was probably yelling at his team right now, demanding they fabricate the files, forcing them to participate in his fraud. I paced around my apartment. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor. I felt helpless. I was the one with the truth, but I was locked out. Then, at 6:15 in the evening, my phone chimed with an email notification. It was not a text. It was an automated message from the governance platform. Because I had built the system, my personal email was listed as a secondary recovery contact for my user profile. I had forgotten to remove it. I looked at the notification preview. "Subject attestation submitted successfully. Project Mirror." I froze. I stopped breathing for a second. I opened the email. "Dear Harper Gonzalez, thank you for completing the final governance review for Project Mirror. Your electronic signature has been applied. The project status has been updated to compliant." I stared at the screen. The timestamp was 6:14 p.m. I was standing in my living room. My laptop was in the custody of Human Resources. My badge was in a drawer at the security desk. I had not signed that document. Grant had done it. He had followed through on his threat. He had used the administrative override. Or perhaps he had bullied the IT team into resetting my password. He had logged in as me, or used a system function to impersonate me. And he had applied my name to the release. He needed a scapegoat. If the project blew up, he wanted my name on the approval, not his. He was setting me up to take the fall for the fraud he was committing. I felt a cold rage that was sharper and clearer than anything I had felt before. He had stolen my identity. He had stolen my integrity. I did not panic. I did not call Owen. I did not call Sabrina. I took a screenshot of the email on my phone. I made sure the time and date were clearly visible. I opened the browser and navigated back to the ethics case portal. I clicked Update Case. I uploaded the screenshot. In the comments section, I typed a single sentence. "I am currently on administrative leave and do not have access to company systems." Yet an attestation was just submitted under my name at 6:14 p.m. This is evidence of identity theft and unauthorized signature misuse by leadership. I hit submit. The countdown was over. The bomb had gone off. But Grant Halverson did not know yet that he had just blown himself up. The silence that followed my report to the ethics hotline lasted exactly 14 hours. When the machine finally turned its gears, it did not move with the frantic energy of Grant Halverson. It moved with the slow, crushing weight of a glacier. On the morning of October 3rd, I received a phone call from a number with a Chicago area code. It was not Human Resources. It was not Grant. "This is David Chen, lead investigator for internal audit," a deep, calm voice said. "I am calling regarding case number 88392B. Are you in a secure location to speak?" "I am at home," I said, sitting up straighter on my couch. "I am alone." "Good," David said. "We have commenced a forensic review of the Project Mirror launch protocols. We need to verify several data points with you to establish a timeline. I am going to send you a secure link for a video deposition. Please log in immediately." The investigation had begun. For the next 2 days, I lived inside that video link. The internal audit team was an independent body, separate from the delivery hierarchy. They did not care about release dates. They did not care about revenue targets. They cared about truth. And they were dissecting the last 96 hours of my life with surgical precision. The first layer of the lie peeled away when they pulled the audit trail for the electronic signature. David shared his screen with me during our second session. "Ms. Gonzalez," he said, "we have a record of an attestation submitted at 6:14 in the evening on October 1st. The user ID matches yours. The password hash matches yours. However, we have a discrepancy with the device fingerprint." I leaned in. "I did not sign it. My laptop was in the possession of Sabrina Holt at that time." "We know," David said. "The signature was generated from a desktop computer located in the executive suite. Specifically, the machine assigned to the director of delivery. Grant had not even been smart enough to use a VPN. He had signed my name from his own desk." "He claimed it was a misunderstanding," David said, his voice devoid of emotion. "When we questioned Mr. Halverson this morning, he stated that you had given verbal consent before leaving the building and that the system simply auto-submitted the form based on a preset workflow." "That is a lie," I said firmly. "There is no auto-submit function for a compliance attestation. The code explicitly forbids it. It requires a manual keystroke." "We are aware," David said. "We had it pull the system logs. We found a command entered at 7:55 in the evening on September 30th. The command was to enable delegate access for your profile. The requester was Grant Halverson. He granted himself the right to sign on your behalf." "Did he have authorization?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "No," David said. "He used an administrative override. He bypassed the dual control requirement. The second layer peeled away thanks to Mia Calder." David pulled up another document. It was a PDF file of the test results. "We interviewed the QA lead, Mia Calder, 2 hours ago," David told me. "She provided us with the original raw data files from the testing server. She had saved them to a personal encrypted drive before they were deleted from the network." "Deleted?" I asked. "Yes," David said. "The live test results on the shared drive were purged on the morning of the launch. They were replaced by this PDF. If you look at the timestamps on the PDF, they are static. It is just a picture of a successful test. But Mia's raw data shows that the actual tests were failing right up until the moment of deletion." Mia had come through. She had been terrified, but she had kept the receipts. She had proven that the green light the client saw was just a painted piece of glass over a red alarm. Then came the money. The investigation expanded beyond the technical controls into the financial records. The procurement team had been flagged by audit to review the vendor contracts Grant had rushed through. "We are looking at the contract for the third-party payment accelerator," David said, scrolling through a spreadsheet. "This vendor was onboarded in 48 hours. The standard vetting period is 2 weeks. Grant said they were an industry leader," I said. "He said they were necessary for velocity. They are a shell company," David said flatly. "The company was registered 6 months ago. The address listed is a residential mailbox in Delaware. We found a clause in the contract for implementation consulting fees totaling $200,000. The payment terms were immediate." I felt sick. He was not just cutting corners to hit a deadline, he was funneling money. "We are still tracing the beneficiary of those fees," David said, "but the conflict of interest is undeniable." The final blow, the one that shattered the entire illusion of Grant Halverson, came from a background check. It was a twist I had not expected. On the third day of the investigation, David looked more serious than usual. "We ran an enhanced due diligence check on Mr. Halverson," David said. "Standard procedure for an executive involved in a fraud investigation. We contacted his previous employer, the one listed on his resume as a successful 4-year tenure. He came from strategic programs," I recalled. "Or that is what the announcement said." "He was terminated from his last position," David corrected. "He did not leave voluntarily. He was fired for a policy dispute regarding the falsification of sales data. It was settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement, which is why it did not appear on the standard background check. But once we asked specifically about compliance violations, their legal team was legally obligated to confirm the cause of termination. He was a recidivist. He had done this before. He had cooked the books at his last job, got caught, and somehow talked his way into Hawthorne Arc Systems to do it all over again." "Does the CEO know?" I asked. "She does now," David said. "The investigation was no longer a query. It was an execution order. The evidence was overwhelming. We had the IP address. We had the deleted logs. We had the fraudulent vendor contract. We had the history of prior misconduct. Grant Halverson had built a monument to his own ego, but he had built it on a foundation of quicksand." "Ms. Gonzalez," David said, closing the folder on his screen. "We have concluded the preliminary phase of the investigation. We are convening a compliance review committee meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. "Am I invited?" I asked. "You are not just invited," David said. "You are the primary witness. The CEO, Marjorie Klein, will be presiding. Legal counsel will be present, and Mr. Halverson will be there to answer to the findings." "I am still on administrative leave," I said. "I do not have a badge. Security has been notified," David said. "They will be waiting for you in the lobby. Wear a suit. Harper, this is not going to be a performance review. This is going to be a tribunal." I closed my laptop. My hands were steady. For days, I had felt like a victim. I had felt small and powerless against the corporate machine, but the machine had turned. The gears had ground into reverse. I walked to my closet and pulled out my best navy blue blazer. I ironed my white shirt until the collar was razor sharp. I was going back to the fishbowl. But this time, I was not the one who was going to be thrown to the sharks. Grant Halverson had spent months talking about optics. He wanted everything to look good. Well, tomorrow morning, he was going to get exactly what he wanted. Every eye in the company was going to be on him, and the view was going to be spectacular. The executive briefing center on the top floor was not designed for comfort. It was designed for judgment. The table was a slab of gray slate that looked like a tombstone, long enough to seat 20 people. On the morning of October 4th, there were only 7 of us in the room, but the air felt crowded with the ghosts of every bad decision Grant Halverson had made in the last 4 months. I sat at the far end of the table. To my right was David Chen from Internal Audit, his laptop open and connected to the main projector. To my left was the General Counsel, a man named Marcus Vane, who was known for never blinking and never smiling. Across from me sat Sabrina Holt from HR, who looked like she was trying to make herself invisible, and Grant Halverson. Grant looked different. The shine was gone. His suit was still expensive, but his tie was slightly crooked, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of caffeine could hide. At the head of the table sat Marjorie Klein, the CEO of Hawthorne Arc Systems. She was a woman who spoke softly and carried a sledgehammer. She did not look at me. She did not look at Grant. She stared at a single folder placed perfectly in the center of the slate table. "This is an emergency session of the Compliance Review Committee," Marjorie said. Her voice was not loud, but it silenced the hum of the air conditioning. "We are here to review the launch protocols for Project Mirror. Grant, you asked to speak first. Go ahead." Grant stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the whiteboard, grabbing a marker even though he had nothing to write. It was a reflex. He needed to be performing. "Thank you, Marjorie," Grant began. He tried to project confidence, but his voice cracked slightly on the first syllable. I want to frame the context here. We are a company in transition. We are moving from a legacy mindset to an agile mindset. When I took over delivery, I found a culture of stagnation. He gestured vaguely in my direction without making eye contact. Harper Gonzalez is a talented analyst, he said, the compliment dripping with poison. But she is resistant to change. She represents the old school of thought where every checkbox is more important than the customer experience. She blocked progress. She refused to align with the strategic velocity we needed. When the deadline approached, she became an obstruction. The project had to pivot. The project had to self-correct. I made executive decisions to ensure we met our contractual obligations to Valenrow Partners. He paused, waiting for a nod from the CEO. Marjorie did not move. So, Grant continued, sweating slightly now, when I authorized the override, it was not an act of negligence. It was an act of leadership. I removed a bottleneck so the business could breathe. He sat down. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lung. Marjorie turned her head slowly toward me. "Harper," she said, "your response." I did not stand up. I did not walk to the whiteboard. I did not use buzzwords. I opened the black notebook I had placed on the table. "I do not have a speech about culture," I said. "I have a timeline." I read from the page. August 15th, I sent a memo detailing the risks of skipping the penetration test. It was ignored. September 10th, I flagged the lack of vendor vetting for the payment accelerator. Grant replied via email with the phrase, "Approved. Move forward." September 30th, 7:06 in the evening, Grant demanded I sign an attestation for a system with 0 evidence logs. When I refused, I was placed on administrative leave. I looked up at Grant. "I did not block progress," I said. "I blocked a suicide attempt, and regarding the signature that appeared on the document on October 1st, I was not in the building. I did not sign it. That is not resistance." "That is identity theft," Grant scoffed. "That is a dramatic interpretation." Marcus Vane, the general counsel, leaned forward. "Let us look at the data." He signaled to David Chen. David tapped a key on his laptop. The massive screen at the end of the room lit up. It displayed the raw audit logs from the governance platform. "This is the transaction record for the signature," David said. His voice was clinical. "The user ID belongs to Harper Gonzalez. However, the IP address originating the request is 10.1.5.9. David clicked again. A floor map of the office appeared. A red dot pulsed in the corner office. "That IP address is hardwired to the docking station in the office of the Director of Delivery," David said. "Furthermore, the device ID matches the laptop assigned to Grant Halverson." The room seemed to drop 10 degrees in temperature. Grant stared at the screen. He blinked rapidly. "That proves nothing," Grant stammered. I often let my team use my station for collaboration. It is an open-door policy. Anyone could have walked in there. Maybe Harper came back. Maybe she used my machine to frame me. The security logs show Harper Gonzalez exited the building at 7:40 in the evening on September 30th. David said, "Her badge has not been used since. The signature was submitted 24 hours later." Grant shifted in his chair. "Then it was it. It must have been a glitch. Owen Rusk was messing with the permissions. He probably granted the wrong access level when we were trying to fix the logging issue." The door to the boardroom opened. Owen Rusk walked in. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing his standard hoodie, and he looked terrified. But he held his head high. He had been waiting in the anteroom. "I did not make a mistake," Owen said clearly. He walked to the table and placed a printed email chain in front of the CEO. "Grant explicitly ordered me to enable delegation rights," Owen said. "He told me it was a matter of executive urgency. He told me that if I did not do it, I would be fired for insubordination. I have the chat logs. I have the email. I did not grant the wrong access. I granted the access he demanded." Grant turned on Owen, his face twisting into a snarl. "You are a low-level manager. Owen, you do not understand the pressure of this delivery. You are confused." "Mr. Halverson," Marcus Vane cut in. His voice was sharp as a razor. Grant froze. "The question is simple," Marcus said. "Did you, or did you not, personally execute the command to apply Harper's signature to the federal compliance document?" Grant looked at Marcus, then he looked at Marjorie. He looked for an exit, but there were no doors open to him anymore. I facilitated the completion of the process," Grant said, using the passive voice like a shield. "I ensured the box was checked so the client would be happy. It was a procedural step. The system is fine. The client is happy. Why are we dissecting this?" Marjorie Klein reached out and pressed a button on the conference phone sitting in the center of the table. "We are dissecting this," Marjorie said, "because the client is on the line." Grant's face went white, a sickly, pale shade of gray that matched the table. "Hello," Marjorie said. A voice filled the room. It was crisp, authoritative, and angry. "This is Elias Thorne, Chief Risk Officer for Valenrow Partners," the voice said. "We have been listening for the last 10 minutes. Grant looked like he was going to vomit. "Mr. Halverson," Elias Thorne said, "when you emailed us on October 1st stating that you had the evidence package, we assumed you were telling the truth. However, our own security team noticed unusual traffic patterns from your API this morning. We ran a trace. We found that your encryption protocols are non-existent." "That is a glitch," Grant whispered. "It is not a glitch," Elias snapped. "It is a breach of contract. But more importantly, we have just heard testimony that the compliance attestation was falsified. Mr. Halverson, if that signature is fake, then the entire master service agreement is void. We are not just suspending the launch. We are initiating a fraud report with the federal regulators. Our legal team is drafting the notice as we speak." Grant stood up. "Elias, please, let me explain. This is an internal misunderstanding. The product works. We can patch the encryption." "Do not speak to me," Elias said. "Marjorie, I expect a formal written statement from your board regarding this liability within 1 hour. If I do not get it, we pull the funding." The line went dead with a loud click. The silence that returned to the room was absolute. It was the silence of a building collapsing. Marjorie Klein looked at the phone, then she looked at Grant. "Sit down," she said. Grant sank into his chair. He looked small. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind only a desperate man in a suit that suddenly looked too big for him. "We can fix this," Grant whispered. "I can call him back. I can smooth it over. I just need a day." Marjorie stood up. She picked up the folder in front of her and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "We are past damage control, Grant," she said. Her voice was final. "We are in liability. You did not just break a rule. You broke the company. You exposed us to a lawsuit that could bankrupt this division." She slid the paper across the slate table toward him. "Legal has prepared your termination notice," Marjorie said. "It is for cause, effective immediately." Grant stared at the paper. "You cannot do this. I delivered the project." "You delivered a crime scene," Marcus Vane corrected. "Security is waiting outside the door. You will not return to your desk. You will not touch a computer. You are done." Grant looked at me. For the first time, there was no condescension in his eyes. There was only shock. He looked at me as if he could not believe that I, the quiet analyst who took notes in the back of the room, had been the one to dismantle him. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just looked at him and closed my notebook. "The process works, Grant," I said softly. "You just have to read the lines." Marjorie looked at the security guard standing by the door and nodded. "Get him out of here," she said. The room did not empty after the security team took a step toward Grant Halverson. It simply shifted gears. The emotional shock of the client call dissipated, replaced instantly by the cold, mechanical grinding of the legal apparatus. We were no longer discussing a project launch. We were discussing the anatomy of a corporate execution. Marcus Vane, the general counsel, took command of the room. He motioned for the security guard to wait. He did not want Grant to leave just yet. He wanted Grant to sit there and watch, as the walls were methodically sealed around him. "Before we finalize the termination paperwork," Marcus said, his voice dry and precise, "we need to ensure the cause is airtight. We are not just looking at one forged signature anymore. We are looking at a systemic pattern of operational negligence." He turned to the internal audit team. "David, run the 90-day retrospective on all emergency change tickets approved by the Director of Delivery." David Chen typed a command. The screen flickered. A spreadsheet populated the wall, dense with data. "We identified 47 emergency changes in the last 3 months," David reported. "In 90% of these cases, the standard peer review process was bypassed. The justification logged was always the same 2 words: executive urgency. Zoom in on the testing protocols," Marcus ordered. "The pattern is consistent," David said. For every major release, the testing window was shortened by an average of 60%. Tickets that were marked as "in progress" at 9 in the morning were manually changed to "closed by noon" without any corresponding upload of results. The user modifying the status was always Grant Halverson. Grant sat slumped in his chair. He looked like a man trying to make himself small enough to fall through the cracks in the floor. "That was efficiency," Grant muttered, though the fight had gone out of his voice. "I was cutting red tape." "You were cutting the safety lines," Marcus corrected. He turned to the procurement representative who had joined the call via video link. "What about the vendor, the payment accelerator that was onboarded in 48 hours?" "We finished the cross-reference on the business registry." The procurement officer's voice crackled through the speakers. "The vendor, Apex Solutions, lists a registered agent address in Wilmington, Delaware. That address is a mail drop." "We know that," Marcus said impatiently. "Connect it." "We cross-referenced the secondary officers of the company," the officer continued. "The secretary of Apex Solutions is listed as a woman named Eleanor Vance. We ran a background check. Eleanor Vance is the maiden name of Grant Halverson's sister." The silence in the room was absolute. This was not just bad management. This was embezzlement. Grant had funneled company funds to a shell entity controlled by his family. Grant closed his eyes. He knew he was done. "That is a conflict of interest," Marcus said, writing something down on his legal pad. "And it is fraud. That gives us grounds for immediate dismissal and potential criminal referral." Grant opened his eyes. He looked at Marjorie Klein, the CEO. He decided to play his last card. It was the card of a desperate man trying to save his future employability. "Marjorie," Grant said, his voice low, "let us be reasonable. You do not want a scandal. You do not want the headlines saying your director of delivery was defrauding the company. It will tank the stock price. It will scare off other clients." He leaned forward, trying to regain some semblance of his former confidence. "I will resign," Grant offered. "I will walk away today. No severance, no noise. I will sign a non-disclosure agreement. You get me out, and you keep the company reputation clean. We call it a strategic divergence." Marjorie Klein looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. She turned to me. "Harper," she said. I looked up. "You were the one who flagged this," Marjorie said. "You were the one who was suspended for it. What do you think?" I looked at Grant. He was pleading with me with his eyes. He wanted me to give him an out. He wanted me to be the nice, quiet compliance analyst who smoothed things over. "If you let him resign," I said, my voice steady, "then the records will show he left voluntarily. It implies he did nothing wrong. It implies that my suspension was justified because there was no crime found. It validates his narrative." I turned to Marjorie. "I do not care about the stock price," I said. "I care about the truth. If he resigns, he goes to another company and does this again. He destroys another team. The only way to stop it is to put it on the record." Marjorie nodded slowly. She turned back to Grant. "Request denied," she said. "We are not accepting your resignation. You are being terminated for cause. It will be in your file. It will be reported to the regulators, and we will be pursuing the recovery of the consulting fees paid to your sister." Grant's face twisted in anger. You cannot do that. You have no proof that I forced anyone to do anything. The signature was a mistake. The rest is just aggressive management. Actually, a small voice spoke up from the other side of the table. We all turned. It was Sabrina Holt from Human Resources. She had been silent for the entire meeting, clutching her folder. Now, she placed her phone on the slate table. I have the proof, Sabrina said. Her voice was shaking, but she pushed the phone toward the general counsel. What is this? Marcus asked. It is the chat log from the night of September 30th, Sabrina said. Tears were welling in her eyes. Grant messaged me on his personal device at 7:30 in the evening. He told me that I had to process Harper's administrative leave immediately. He told me that if I did not get her out of the building before 8 o'clock, he would put me on a performance improvement plan. He said he would make sure I never worked in this industry again. Grant lunged forward. Sabrina, shut up. Sit down, the security guard barked, stepping forward. Sabrina did not flinch. I was scared. I have a family. I did what he told me to do, but I kept the messages. He admitted in the text that he needed her gone so he could fix the paperwork himself. That was the nail in the coffin. It was coercion. It was premeditated obstruction of justice. Marcus Vane picked up the phone and scrolled through the messages. He nodded once to the CEO. We have everything we need, Marcus said. Marjorie looked at me again. Her gaze was softer this time. Harper, she said, Human Resources will rescind your administrative leave effective immediately. The suspension will be scrubbed from your record. We want you back on the team. In fact, we need you to lead the remediation of Project Mirror. Can you start today? I looked at the table. I looked at the wreckage of the last 4 months. I looked at Owen, who was still standing by the door, waiting for a signal that we were safe. I appreciate that, Marjorie, I said. But I cannot go back to my desk today. Why not? She asked. Because the system is still broken, I said. Not just the software. The culture. You let a man like this dismantle our controls because he promised you speed. You ignored the warnings until the client threatened to leave. I want to come back, but not as a fix-it crew. I want my role to have veto power. I want compliance to report to the board, not to delivery. Marjorie paused. She understood what I was asking. I was asking for a structural change that would prevent another Grant Halverson from ever happening. I want the truth recorded first, I continued. I want the audit report finalized. I want the apology to the team made public. Regarding my return, we can discuss the terms later. Right now, I am going home to sleep. Marjorie nodded. Fair enough. She turned to the security guard. Escort Mr. Halverson out, she said. Take his badge. Grant stood up. He tried to straighten his tie. To retain some shred of dignity, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his plastic access card. He threw it onto the slate table. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. You are making a mistake, Grant said. You are choosing bureaucracy over innovation. We are choosing honesty over fraud. I said. The guard took Grant by the arm. As they walked toward the door, Marcus Vane typed a command into his laptop. We heard the distinct beep of the door reader as Grant tried to pass through the exit, but instead of the usual green light, the reader flashed a harsh, solid red. Access denied. Marcus had deactivated his credentials in real time. Grant pushed the door, but the magnetic lock held firm. He had to wait for the guard to swipe his own badge to let him out. The door closed behind him. The room let out a collective breath that we had been holding for days. I will set the board meeting for tomorrow morning to ratify the termination, Marjorie said, gathering her papers. Sabrina, please cooperate fully with legal to document the coercion. You are not in trouble, provided you tell us everything. Sabrina nodded, wiping her eyes. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my head was clear. I walked over to Owen. Did we win? Owen asked quietly. We survived, I said. Winning comes later. I walked out of the executive suite. I did not take the elevator. I took the stairs, listening to the sound of my own footsteps, one step at a time, echoing in the stairwell. I was walking away from the fire, but for the first time in months, I did not smell smoke. The final act of a corporate tragedy does not happen with a bang, it happens with a slide deck. The board of directors meeting on the morning of October 5th was held in the sanctum, a conference room on the penthouse floor that most employees did not even know existed. The view from the windows offered a panoramic sweep of the city skyline. But the blinds were drawn tight. The room smelled of expensive coffee and polished wood. I sat in the back row against the wall. I was not there to vote. I was there as a piece of evidence. Grant Halverson sat at the far end of the long table. He was no longer wearing his jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, not in the casual way he used to do to show he was working hard, but in the frantic way of a man who was overheating. David Chen from Internal Audit stood at the podium. He did not look at Grant. He looked only at the board members, a group of 6 men and women who held the fate of the company in their hands. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," David began. His voice was steady and devoid of theater. "Our investigation into the launch of Project Mirror has concluded. We have categorized our findings into 3 distinct groups of critical failure." David clicked a remote. The screen behind him lit up. "Group 1, David said. Falsification of federal compliance documents. We have irrefutable forensic evidence that the director of delivery used administrative overrides to sign the name of a compliance officer without consent. This constitutes identity theft and wire fraud." Grant flinched. He stared at the water glass in front of him. "Group 2, David continued. Systematic dismantling of internal controls. The testing protocols were not just shortened, they were deleted. The logging systems were deliberately suppressed to hide error rates. This created a blindness in our operational risk profile that violated our banking covenants." David clicked again. "Group 3, David said. Vendor conflict of interest. We have traced financial payments to a consulting firm linked to the immediate family of Mr. Halverson. This is a direct violation of the Code of Ethics and constitutes embezzlement." The board members remained silent. They turned the pages of the thick binders in front of them. The sound of paper turning was the only noise in the room. The chairman of the board, a man named Arthur Sterling, who had founded the company 30 years ago, took off his reading glasses. He looked down the table at Grant. "Mr. Halverson," Arthur said. His voice was gravelly and low. "You have heard the charges. You have 5 minutes to speak." Grant stood up. He gripped the edge of the table. I could see the knuckles of his hands turning white. He took a breath, trying to summon the charismatic leader he had played so well for 4 months. "The audit creates a picture that is technically accurate, but contextually wrong," Grant said. He looked around the room, trying to make eye contact, but no one looked back. We were losing market share. We were bleeding relevance. I was brought in here to fix a culture of slowness. I made hard choices. I pushed the boundaries because that is what innovators do. The product is live. The revenue is flowing. I did this for the benefit of the company. I took the risks so you would not have to." He paused, waiting for a nod, a sign of understanding. "I delivered," Grant said, his voice rising slightly. "I cut through the bureaucracy that was choking this organization. If I broke a few rules, it was to save the quarter. It was to save the stock price." Grant sat down. He looked exhausted, but there was a flicker of defiance in his eyes. He truly believed he was the hero of this story. Arthur Sterling put his glasses back on. He looked at Grant with an expression that was not angry, but disappointed. "Mr. Halverson," Arthur said, "you talk about benefit, you talk about strategy, but there is one question you have not answered." Arthur leaned forward. "If your decisions were so correct, and if your authority was so absolute, why did you have to sign her name?" Arthur pointed a finger toward me at the back of the room. "Why not sign your own name?" Arthur asked. "If you were proud of the risk, why steal the identity of an analyst to approve it?" Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The logic trap snapped shut. If he was right, he would have signed it himself. The fact that he used my name proved he knew it was wrong. He knew it was toxic. Grant stammered. "I was delegating." "No," Arthur said. You were framing. Arthur turned to Marcus Vane, the general counsel. What is the recommendation of the legal department? Arthur asked. Marcus stood up. He held a single sheet of paper. The actions of the director of delivery have created a material breach of contract with our largest client and exposed the corporation to significant liability. Marcus read, furthermore, the financial impropriety with the vendor triggers automatic reporting requirements to the Securities and Exchange Commission. It is the recommendation of legal that Grant Halverson be terminated for cause, effective immediately, with a forfeiture of all invested equity. Arthur looked around the table. I call for a vote, Arthur said. All in favor of the recommendation. 6 hands went up. It was fast. It was cold. There was no debate. There was no hesitation. It was a mechanical purging of a virus. The motion carries, Arthur said. He slid a document toward Marjorie Klein, the CEO. Marjorie picked up a heavy fountain pen. She signed her name at the bottom of the termination order. She did not look happy. She looked relieved, but also regretful that it had come to this. She was protecting the company by doing the right thing, but she was doing it months too late. This meeting is adjourned, Arthur said. 2 security officers stepped out from the shadows near the door. They walked over to Grant. Mr. Halverson, one of them said. Please come with us. Grant stood up. He looked stripped. The suit, the title, the arrogance, it was all gone. He looked at the board members, but they were already packing up their laptops, ignoring him. He was a non-entity. As the guards escorted him toward the side exit, he had to pass by where I was sitting. He stopped for a second. The guard put a hand on his elbow to urge him forward, but Grant resisted. He looked down at me. His eyes were full of venom. You think you won, Grant hissed, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You think you are noble. You just played dirty. You set a trap. I looked up at him. I did not blink. I did not feel fear anymore. I saw him for what he was, a small man who thought rules were for other people. I did not play, Grant, I said softly. I just did my job. I followed the process. The guard pulled him away. Let us go, sir, the guard said. The door closed behind him. Grant Halverson was gone. The room began to clear out. Marjorie Klein walked over to me. She looked tired. Thank you for coming. Harper, she said. We have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust with the client. Yes, I said. You do? Sabrina Holt from Human Resources approached me next. She held a thick envelope in her hands. She looked terrified, as if she expected me to scream at her. Harper, Sabrina said, this is for you. It is a formal letter rescinding your administrative leave. It confirms that you committed no wrongdoing. The suspension has been erased from your employment history. She handed me the envelope. There is also an offer inside. Sabrina continued. The company would like to offer you a reinstatement with a promotion to principal audit manager. Or, if you prefer, there is a severance package with 6 months of salary and a full release of claims. It is your choice. And there is a formal apology from the executive team included. I took the envelope. It felt heavy. Thank you. Sabrina, I said. What will you do? She asked. I am going to take a few days, I said. I need to think about whether I want to fix a house that almost fell on top of me. I turned and walked toward the main doors. I pushed them open and stepped out into the hallway. The corridor was long and empty. The carpet dampened the sound of my footsteps. I walked to the elevator bank and pressed the down button. I stood there alone. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I filled my lungs until they ached, and then I let the air out in a long, slow exhale. It was over. I felt a lightness I had not felt in 4 months. It was not the thrill of victory. It was not the joy of revenge. It was the simple, profound relief of gravity returning to normal. I had held up the sky for as long as I could, and finally, someone else had acknowledged the weight. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. I was going to walk out the front door, into the sunlight, and for the first time in a long time, I was going to leave the paperwork behind. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your location and your thoughts on corporate justice. If you enjoyed seeing the truth win, please subscribe to the Boss Revenge Stories channel. Hit the like button on this video and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story.